This is the Aftermarket Radio Network.
Welcome to another episode of Business by the Numbers. I'm your host, Hunt Demarest, CPA with Parmelis & Associates. You started your shop with some tools and probably rented a space. Maybe even used your house before you went and rented a space. You grow your team, your business, and now it's time to start thinking about owning the real estate as well. Should you get a loan? Should you have financing from the owner? Can you even afford this? And everything else in between is what we're going to talk about this week. Before we get into that, though, I want to just stop and say thank you to you and the rest of the dedicated listeners. Remember, if you want to hear your question answered on here or just have a question, shoot me an email at podcast@parmelis.com. And lastly, we cannot forget our dedicated sponsors, NAPA TRACS and Promotive, for being such loyal supporters of the show and the aftermarket as well. If you need that new rock star, if you want to get into the SMS fast lane, give Promotive, give NAPA TRACS a call and let them know that we sent you. Hey, did you know NAPA TRACS has on-site training plus 6 days a week support? It all starts when a local representative meets you to learn more about your business and how you run it. After all, it's your shop, so it's your choice. Let us prove to you that TRACS is the single best shop management system in the business. Visit them online at napatracs.com. That's NAPATRACS.com. Promotive makes automotive recruitment simple. They go beyond the job boards and take care of every aspect of the recruiting process, giving you more time to focus on your shop and your customers. Visit them on the web at gopromotive.com. Let's get into this one with the example that kind of started this whole episode. These amounts are I shouldn't even say they're different, but I'm transparent with you guys. I want to be honest with you. These are not the actual amounts of my clients, but they're very, very, very close. Really, the only reason I changed the number on a lot of these things, some of it is to make it more applicable to other people, right? If I have a really extreme example, that's probably not going to hit home for a lot of people that don't have a $70 million trust fund or whatever it is. Not that I do or really any of my clients, but use an example. But really on this one, we're not going to get into super numbers heavy stuff on this, but you're also listening to a numbers podcast, hence the name. Probably don't like math. Most people don't, myself included. And these are just a little bit easier. Hopefully follow along, because what we're going to do here is we're going to go down through this exercise and we'll talk about the end. I mean, there is a short answer to this that I could have given you, but I want you guys to, no pun intended, look under the hood. When you guys come, and you're probably been in my client's shoes, and maybe even ask me, I'm your accountant, or maybe ask your accountant, this is kind of the stuff that goes on. Is this saying, hey, this is why you get an accountant? No, I'm going to go down through and I'm going to do exactly this. You're looking at buying a new shop. You're looking at one point, maybe owning the real estate on it. This is the kind of stuff that you need to take a look at, because when my clients ask me about it, this is the stuff that we do together. So without further ado, let's go to this example. Again, names have been removed to protect the innocent and shortened, but this is real life happening right now. Long story short, the client reached out to me and said, Hunt, I've been talking to my landlord about buying the building, as you and I have been talking about. We have got an awesome business. It just made sense to own a real estate, but I think he talked over the years. If you really wanted this one, all right, a lot of you guys can probably commiserate here. It's the shop that you have. Is it the shop that you want? Hey, this is the shop I rent. Would I own this building? I'm not sure. It was built in the 30s. For a military base. So it's been repurposed 15 times over. It was kind of the case with my client there too, but also he just had very affordable rent. Everything else was going on pretty good. He had some stuff going on that he was dealing with, and it just never really came up. Flash forward to today, he's now saying, all right, I am going to think about buying the building. And this is where he gets into the details. He's talking about it and he says, currently, I'm paying $3,000 a month in rent. He didn't say that. He knows I know what he pays. But essentially right now he's paying $3,000 in rent. And it looks like if he is going to buy this, that he is going to be paying around $6,000. Those numbers might not be right, but let's not bury the lead here. His big question here, after all this, and it was a lot of different things, a lot of backstory, this client's actually really good because I think he knows the answer on this one, but also gave me all the other intangibles that you guys obviously don't know. but was a pretty easy one to be able to look and say, yeah, you're good to go here. And so I'll bury the lead. This person said, can I afford this? And I could have saved a lot of time and avoided this episode by saying yes, but let's go in there and let's really see why I said yes, or we'll soon say yes. We have a lot to look in here. Believe it or not, with just a really small amount of information here. Hey, looking at buying a building, landlord wants to sell it. I paid $3,000. It's going to be $6,000. Can I afford it? What is there to unpack? There's not a whole lot going on there. Just to like your customers, address the primary concern first. Time and time again. All right, blah, 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 blah. I want to go back. I'm going to tell you about this case, all that, this tax code. No. What was your primary concern? These other things are probably related, but just like when your customer comes back in and says, hey, my brakes are squealing. I'd love to talk to you about your shocks. You're never just going to skip over their primary concern and say, hey, focus on this, because you're not listening to what they're concerned about. Their car, their concerns. Just like that with you and your finances. The whole question here is, can I afford that? Again, let's take a look at a face value, even though it's not. What we're looking at right now is about a $3,000 difference a month. It's going to cost us $3,000 or more for the mortgage payment compared to what we are currently paying right now for rent. So if we want to look at a month, it's going to cost us $3,000. You want to look at it on the year, it'll cost us $36,000. Let's round up and call it $40,000. The easiest thing to do, and sometimes this is a no-brainer, is you take a look at that. All things considered, you are going to be spending $40,000 more than you were in the past. Let's take a look and see what your profit was for last year. And this is exactly what you should be doing with your business. Profit is drastically different than this year in a better way. You can use that, but keep in mind that if it works for this year and didn't work for last year, you don't have a whole lot of history to be able to say, hey, I know in the future I'm going to be able to cover that. But we'll talk about projections here in a second. So let's take a look at this client, and we go down through and notice, all right, we made $150,000 of profit after we paid all of our rent, every other piece of overhead. So if we have $150,000 in profit for 2023, even if I said, all right, great, take away 40 from our additional cost of buying this building, we're still cash flow profit positive of $110,000. It's not even close whatsoever. Of course, we can afford it. This one, like I said, is a little bit easy. It's a little bit cut and dry, and we'll see that there's even more to it. But I want to go down through all the different options. Look at this as a flow chart. First and foremost, hey, can your profit cover it last year? If yes, proceed further. And then what that would be looking at is, all right, how many times over could it cover it? And what I mean by that is this. If I'm looking at an extra $40,000 in expense, would you be more comfortable if you had 3-4 times that in profit or 1 times that? Well, if you have 1 times, it means, hey, I made $40,000 of profit last year. With the increased rent for this year, I would break even. That doesn't leave you a whole lot of room for error or any sort of pullbacks and stuff like that. The same flip side here, if we look at it and the guy's making $150,000, hey, I could cover that additional expense 4 times over. There's a good bit of contraction, there's a good bit of correction I can absorb here and still be able to afford this. If you don't have the profit, it is not a deal breaker. Think about the current location that you're in right now. Could you afford to be where you are right now 10 years ago? Probably not, because you would say, hey, I wouldn't have that expense if I didn't have this income, or if I didn't have this revenue source, et cetera, et cetera. This situation doesn't really merit it, but I'll use another situation I dealt with recently. All things considered, this client was currently breaking even right now where they are. And so if they were going to move, it was something crazy. Like their current rent right now was $1,500. They don't have the money to buy it, so they were going to a new place, and it was going to be like almost $5,000. So it was like a $3,500 increase. Now you might be saying to yourself, oh my God, that's crazy. No, if I told you where they were, you're like, wait, how are they paying $1,500, let alone even $4,500 there or $5,000 there? But they forced into a decision of saying, hey, we need to move, but obviously we can barely afford this $1,500. How the heck are we ever going to afford it at $5,000? Anytime that you're looking to cover an additional expense, and this is going for covering additional rent costs, this is for additional debt service on it. If you want to put some money away for savings or retirement, this is the same way that you budget it. Essentially, what we need to do here is we need to work back from the numbers that we do know. The whole idea here is, hey, we know we're going to have an extra X amount of an expense for the month. How much more in sales, which is going to turn to gross profit, which is ultimately turn into profit, do we need to cover that? Let's use the original example here just because those are good numbers. How much additional sales would we need to cover a $3,000 monthly expense? When you sell something, regardless of what your employees think, that money does not come straight from the customer's pocket into your pocket. There's expenses, direct, indirect, cost of goods sold, everything else in between. The indirect expenses of the overhead, you can't truly attribute to one individual job. That's a cost to keep the lights on. It should be factored in there, but for this case, we're going to keep it simple and say, guys, we know if we sell something, we absolutely are going to have labor and parts cost. I got to pay the technician to put it on. I got to pay the parts vendor wherever I bought that part from. What we do to take a look at it, how much do we need to cover in expense, is how much in sales do I need to cover that much in gross profit? Because if you think about it, we are getting additional gross profit dollars. If we get an additional $3,000 in gross profit and we don't get an additional expense in overhead, then we are going to have the same exact, or then we're going to have an additional $3,000 at the bottom line. Gross profit goes from $10,000 to $13,000. Overhead stays at $10,000. We're going to have $3,000 left over. That would be the case of, hey, this is boosting the sales, but expenses remain the same. If we increased our sales even more, and we also were increasing our expenses, like we were talking about here, gross profit would go from $10,000 with $10,000 of overhead washing to $13,000 of gross profit with $13,000 of overhead, again, still washing. If we're looking at that, we know, all right, we need an extra X amount of money, whatever it is, 3, 5, 15, we know that we now need to figure out how do we get that much in gross profit. Because even though we're talking about net profit, even though we're talking about cash, everything else is staying steady. So the only thing that we need to shift is gross profit. If you want to overthink this, yeah, technically you don't even need to sell anything additional. You could increase your gross profit by increasing your prices, increasing your parts matrix, increasing your labor rate, all kinds of different things without actually boosting production or technically selling more. Even though you are selling more, you're not selling more quantity. We'll call it quality over quantity. Hey, it's still a brake job. It's now $35,000. Just probably a little bit harder to do at scale. Most of the time, this is going to be adding additional customers, adding additional repair orders, etc. The big thing that you need to know is what is your gross profit percentage? We're going to use the standard industry target here, which is 50%. If I have $100,000 of sales come in, I would expect around half of that, or 50%, to go to my technician, parts costs, shop supplies, sublet, etc., leaving the other 50% remaining to pay my overhead, and in this case, an additional monthly expense. The reason that 50% is nice is not only is it a pretty good target, and more or less, most people hover around there, it makes the algebra very easy. You might not know how to divide by 0.5, but I guarantee you that you know how to multiply by 2, which is essentially the same exact thing. I shouldn't say essentially. It is the same thing. Divide by 0.5 is the same as multiplying times 2. If we need $3,000 in additional expenses or additional cash to cover that expense, we know we need $3,000 of gross profit. If $3,000 is 50% of the sales, then we know we need $6,000 in additional sales to cover a $3,000 expense. Make sense? $6,000 come in, $3,000 goes to NAPA, goes to your technicians, goes to your shop supplies. It's going to leave you $3,000 left over. You already covered your overhead with your other money, so that $3,000 can now go to that retirement account that you always wanted to fund, that new rental, the new truck, whatever it is. Obviously, if your gross profit is higher, you don't need as much in sales. Let's say that you're selling something with 100% gross profit. I don't know what that would be, but there's probably something out there where it's like, hey, you're just giving me money. A donation is 100% gross profit. Hey, give me $3,000. What's my cost? $0. All right, great. You have your money for whatever you need there. But the way that I see this is it's the definition of working smarter. And also some of it is just by nature of what you do. Let's say that you're a high volume tire store. You're doing 5, 6, 8 million, maybe do some wholesale on it. You're not going to have a 50% gross profit, right? I would argue that it's probably 30%, maybe 40%. A lot of different things, quick lubes, things like that. You guys have sometimes lower gross profit than the other. There's all different ways to run this business and run it effectively. NAPA TRACS has made selecting the right shop management system easy by offering the industry's best, most comprehensive SMS. It all starts when a local representative meets with you to learn about your business and how you need to run it. After all, it's your shop, so it's your choice, and having a local representation is a huge plus. Customizing tracks to your business, whether you're a one-person shop or a large multi-bay or multi-location company, our representative consults with you to help optimize your shop's workflow, efficiency, and profitability. And unlike the other guys, we'll be there for you after installation with the best training and support in the business with a learning management system tailored to each role in your company. Simply put, Trax was designed and built for shop owners just like you. Visit us on the web at napatracs.com. That's NAPATRACS.com. Are you tired of spending endless hours searching for the perfect talent to join your team? Promotive is your full-service automotive staffing solution. At Promotive, we believe in being more than just a recruiting agency. We become an extension of your team, working tirelessly to ensure we place the right talent with the right shops. With our always be recruiting mindset, we're constantly seeking out the best professionals in the industry. We manage 90 to 95% of the recruiting process, taking the burden off your shoulders. When you partner with Promotive, you gain a dedicated recruiter and account manager who will work closely with you, understanding your unique requirements and seeking out candidates who fit seamlessly into your shop's culture. We'll ensure that every candidate we present is thoroughly vetted and aligned with your needs. With Promotive, you'll have a peace of mind knowing that we're handling the recruitment process with expertise and precision. We don't just match resumes, we match character, culture, and long-term success. Visit our website at gopromotive.com today and experience the power of Promotive's expertise and dedication. Together, we'll build a stronger and more successful team. What I want to illustrate to you is the difference in that. Let's say that we already talked about $3,000, and at 50% gross profit, you need $6,000 in expenses to cover that. If your gross profit is only 25%, you would actually need $12,000 in sales. Because at 50%, $6,000 turns into $3,000 in gross profit. At 25% gross profit, $12,000 in sales turns into $3,000 in gross profit. If you want to go the exact opposite way and say, Hunt, what if I make my gross profit even better? And I go from 50% to, 75%. Oh yeah, that'll make your target much lower as well too, because you'd only need $4,000 in sales, knowing that 75% of that sale is going to turn into gross profit. General idea on gross profit is the higher your gross profit percentage is, the less sales that you need to cover a specific expense or to generate gross profit. On the other hand, the lower your gross profit is, the more work that you will have to do to generate the same amount of money. Hence the reason working harder, not smarter. One last thing here is, to throw a wrench into this is, can you even afford not to do this? And this situation is not really the case because this client, the landlord, is honestly perfectly fine keeping it forever. My client's an awesome tenant in there. And so he's like, why would I get rid of this? It's paid in full. You pay me like clockwork on it. I'm missing the catch here. But a lot of times what I have is clients where they come and approach you and they say, hey, either your rent's going from $3,000 to $6,000 or get the hell out. Or, hey, either you pay me the additional amount, buy the building from me and go get a loan somewhere, or I'm kicking you out. So then I have clients taking a look at this and taking a look at other opportunities. Oh, I'm not even sure if I want to do this, yada, yada, yada. But a lot of times what people don't factor in is, what is the opportunity cost? So if we're looking at this specific situation here, I say, all right, so it's going to cost you an extra $40,000 a year on it. All right, great. Are you guys doing 1.3, 1.4 million? All right, what do we think this is going to look like? I can't afford it. I'm kind of breaking even anyways. So I said, okay, great. What would it look like if you weren't? Went down through this and talked about the different options, which in my world, we call projections. A lot of times when you're talking of, hey, I think this is going to cost this, that's going to cost this is going to change. Projections is just putting that into format, right? A financial format of saying, hey, the dollars and cents, this expense will go up, that expense will go down. What does this all look like? Banks love them. You guys hate them, but should probably like them more than you do. But a lot of times people are looking at this and saying, all right, I just can't afford to do this. And like I said, my argument is, can you afford not to? When I was going down through this with my client, where he would have to move to and all the stuff, he was factoring in that year 2 and 3 will probably get a little bit better. but he thinks that he'd probably lose around 20% of his sales that first year just from moving, from having to shut down, from losing some customers in his old neighborhood, filling them back up. He think he'd go from 1.4 down to $1 million. This is one where I said, all right, we know what the one alternative. If you stay there, it's going to cost you an extra $40,000 this year. Okay, got it. Well, if you were to leave, the opportunity cost of just you leaving, I haven't factored in moving. I haven't factored in you outfitting a new place. I haven't factored in, hey, you're probably not going to want to take that 20-year-old alignment rack with you, so you're going to need to get a new lease for that. Let's just look at solely the lost revenue here. And this is very similar back to, hey, my technician wants an extra $1 an hour. Well, how much does it cost you if he decides to walk out today and you're empty for a week, 2 weeks, a month? Same idea with this rental. If he was going to leave and he was already admitting that he thinks his annual sales will go from 1.4 to around $1 million, we know we're losing around $400,000 in sales. And if we're at around a 50% market here, we're probably losing around $200,000 of gross profit. Just because my client did not want to spend the extra $40,000, he was staring down the barrel of maybe even financially crippling his business because he was looking at losing 5 times that. Long story short on it, actually worked out just fine. He didn't end up moving on it, and it really didn't become that much more expensive. I think his landlord thought that he was much richer than he was and threw an outrageous price out there. He did end up having to pay a little bit more, but it was actually pretty close. Let's actually get into more of the detail here. And this client has great profit, but like I said before and mentioned, he won't even need to use it. And I'm going to tell you why. The owner of the property has had this forever, and he really does not want to sell this outright. He's maybe a listener of the podcast, so he knows that he's going to get hammered if he sells this. He bought it for nothing 50 years ago, and so whatever he sells it for is all going to be gain. He said, I will sell it, but I will only do owner financing, and just let me know. And that's all that he's taken it. What my client was actually doing when he gave me those numbers of it cost me $3,000 now and it's going to be $6,000 is he was factoring in, all right, I'm going to do owner financing and I guess I'm going to pay him back over 10 years at 7.75% interest. That was also a really massive down payment as well. And that's where things really started to change. I took a look at this and said, hey, I mean, you can negotiate what you want with him, but a 10-year amortization on a loan is really just not common. A 10-year note is, but a 10-year amortization is not. I have to educate you on this, just like I had educated a number of other people, the difference between a loan term and amortization. In the commercial space, it is very common to amortize or spread the life of a loan out longer than you actually have a loan for. The most common one that you see is 5-year balloon notes. I go to a bank and I say, all right, no interest. You're going to loan me $300,000. What they would say is, Hunt, we're going to amortize that over 30 years, meaning they're going to take that $300,000 and say, all right, you're going to pay us $10,000 a year for the next 30 years. However, that's only a 5-year note. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, well, Hunt, how the heck do I have a 5-year note when I'm paying them back over 30 years? No, they are not planning to get paid back over 30. That's how long it gets a little bit weird there, asset class and things like that. But they're only going to guarantee you that they're going to have this note for 5. What happens at the end of the 5 years? You come back to them. You've hopefully paid down some equity. Deal still looks good on it. They take a look at, yeah, we'll keep this for another 5 years. If they don't like the deal, they say, hey, go find another bank and get this refinanced. Very, 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 very common in the commercial side of this to have shorter lives on these loans with longer amortizations. The reason is they know that it would financially cripple a business if they were to force a repayment much sooner than they do. But on the same flip side of it, they don't want to be locked in from saying, hey, we're going to stand by this business now and for the next 3 decades. So many things change that it just doesn't really make sense for them, and they mostly don't do it. You might be thinking to yourself, okay, Hunt, what would we do here? And here's what I did in this situation is if this person is acting as a bank in every way, shape, and form, they have something, they're going to sell it, they're going to give us credit, they're going to take monthly payments. Let's call a spade a spade. This guy is a bank. If he's going to act like a bank, we're going to treat him like a bank. If I took this to a bank would give this over 30 years, and they would give me a 5-year balloon on it. And that's what I would say, we're going to go back to the owner and say the same thing. Appraisal came in, we're cool on cost. We're going to do a standard down payment on this. He was going to give him like 25%, which if he wants to, he can, but it seems a little bit steep for me. But we're going to give some money down and we're going to go back and say, hey, here's what we're going to do. We're going to pay you over 30 years on it. The good news is for you and us that your monthly payment is going to be exactly the same. It was down to, not to the pennies, but within a couple bucks. It's $3,000 now. It's going to be $3,000 in the future. This is an easy sell to the landlord. Hey, you're still going to get your $3,000 a month going forward. You're still going to get interest on this. And even better, you got 5 years. You got to let me borrow this money for 5 years and guarantee that $3,000 a month. But at the end of 5 years, if you don't want to do this anymore, then just let me know. I'll go to Wells Fargo. I'll go to PNC Bank. I'll get a mortgage. I'll have good equity there. Most anyone is going to jump on this deal. However, if you take a look at it and it's still working out pretty well for you and you believe in it, then give me another 5 years on it and we'll just keep on doing this forever. I wish I could give you a resolution on this and tell you how it works out, but still in the process of that. Once was all said and done and we reran the numbers with what I think a normal repayment is, we found that expense-wise it's going to be very similar and virtually identical. Now the question still stands, can I afford this? If you can afford to send that money to your landlord, as you have for the last 8 years without any sort of return, do you think that you can do the same to yourself while also building equity in a piece of real estate? Absolutely. So even though sometimes it would be much easier to just say yes, the longer answer of can I afford this makes a much better episode for you. Please share with friends. If you have any questions, comments, or ideas for a future episode, please shoot me an email at podcast@parmelis.com. Thanks again for listening on the Aftermarket Radio Network. You can find all shows on the aftermarketradionetwork.com and on your favorite podcast listening app. So thanks again for joining me on Business by the Numbers. Stay safe out there, and I'll talk to you all soon.
You've been listening to Business by the Numbers with Hunt Demarest on the Aftermarket Radio Network. Follow Hunt on your favorite podcast listening app. Let him know what you'd like him to cover. His email is in the show notes. Hunt is all for advancing the aftermarket.